We're going to be talking in a little bit about the mayor and the mounting charges against him, but we thought we'd share some slides just to sort of give you a little primer on just what's happening in the mayor's office right now, and calling it a tale of two city halls. So first slide up here now, we're looking at de Blasio and 6 degrees of investigation. Catchy, right? But it's some serious stuff here. They reportedly gave money to the Democratic Party county committees and state party committees as straw donors. So they're being investigated right now, the de Blasio administration, for ties to 2 prominent donors who are under federal probes. It's coming from all angles, folks. And they're also under investigation for removing deed restrictions on a nursing home that was converted into luxury housing after that restriction was lifted. So I think that's a bad business. We're looking at 6 probes of separation now. There's a potential violation of lobbying rules by the de Blasio's nonprofit, the Campaign for One New York. Some are calling it the Mayor's Slush Fund. There is also some looking into the relationships with an animal rights group that's being scrutinized. You might remember the mayor famously championing the cause of the horse-drawn carriages. That's the same group that they're referring to there. And there's been some controversy over the $52 million sale of the Brooklyn Heights Library. That's the business library in downtown Brooklyn, just behind Borough Hall there, following allegations that Bill de Blasio's administration gave preferential treatment to the developer Hudson Companies after 2 bids that a lot of people thought were better and would have brought more money in were denied in favor of that Hudson Companies brief. So that's just a little look inside some of the probes and a tale of 2 city halls. I can tell you now that in 2009, an online reporting startup called DNAInfo published its first issue. Now, at the time, it was pretty Manhattan-centric, but by 2012, it was covering the entire city. And by the time Mayor de Blasio took office in January of 2014, DNA had established itself as New York's neighborhood news source, covering everything from food to crime and, of course, politics. And as we've just seen from the slides, DNAInfo has its hands pretty full right now, but they've taken the time today to help the rest of us get a better grip on these multi-layered mayoral probes. Now, here to help us wade through a lot of that is DNAInfo's news editor, Janon Fisher. Welcome to BK Live.
Thanks for having me.
For joining us. So it's a lot.
Yes, it's a sprawling probe, federal, state. There's politics, the police department, many high-ups in the police department, captains, people being fired. We've had 1 suicide so far.
Yeah.
It's a sprawling probe.
It's like a movie, and it's playing out slowly in front of all of us. Now, what seems sort of crazy about this, almost unprecedented, is the number of allegations flying, and they're coming at all these different levels. The federal people are looking into the administration as well as the state and other authorities. So that seems kind of unprecedented. When was the last time we saw something like that?
That's right. It's almost like dueling investigations. The DA's office is looking into the de Blasio administration, federal probe. U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara is looking into police misconduct and also campaign finance violations. There's an allegation that a donor used what was given access to the police department and was able to obtain gun permits, 150 gun permits, which is, considering the gun problem we have in New York.
Just for the price of a few trips and a little cash, there are all these guns on the street, supposedly, from these permits now.
Exactly, and he was given unprecedented access to One Police Plaza, supposedly showing up twice a week to police headquarters. He was that cozy with the department.
Now, one thing is, I guess de Blasio and their administration, they're sort of trying to use this sort of perfect storm of all these allegations and saying, this is completely, they're coming after me. It's a witch hunt, and it's a whole scheme. People are making it into a conspiracy against me, but the governor, they have this sort of frenemy relationship. He's like, well, if it is a conspiracy, everyone up and down the levels of government is involved. And we've seen both of the leaders of the state Senate go to jail. They're convicts now. Right. Cuomo got a pass, but de Blasio is getting a lot of it on his head now.
He's getting a lot of attention. The Conflict of Interest Board is looking into some campaign finance violations. He received a pretty strongly worded letter about channeling money that he received from his campaign from New York into state Senate campaign election funds to try and take over or have Democrats take over the state Senate. That was a failed bid. That was sort of a power play by the mayor. It was unsuccessful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming from all sides. So yeah, we're looking into all of it. We're pulling campaign finance reports. Our police reporter Murray Weiss has been tapping into his sources in the police department. Jeff Mays, our political reporter, is tapping into his sources and just looking at the story from all angles.
So when you hear Preet Bharara, who's like batting 1,000, is opening an investigation, what does that do to your newsroom? Do you go back and sort of see how he built cases against other people, and then that leads you to the documents, and you just follow the trail down?
Well, I think most political scandals follow the same sort of patterns. It's the old trope of follow the money. We pull campaign finance reports. As you said before, this is an issue that Bloomberg didn't have to worry about. He's a billionaire.
Yeah.
He's got deep pockets.
Write a check.
He was giving out the money. When you have somebody like de Blasio who's asking for money, he's beholden to people who give it to him. So that means the developers and nightclub owners, that sort of thing, that are donating the money.
So when we look at Skelos and Silver, they went down, and a lot of people applauded because they felt like there was a lot of greed there. Like they were people who were using their office to unduly enrich themselves. But that doesn't seem to be the case with this de Blasio, with some of the charges that are going to be leveled, maybe, that it doesn't seem like he's fattening his own pockets. It's maybe like a sort of pay-to-play. Thinking about this contractor who had these rodent-proof bags. He was like, I give $100,000 contribution, and then I get the meeting with the mayor, then we get a contract. But do you have the sense that people think de Blasio's like using his office, like he's going to be in Fat City when all of this is over?
I don't get the sense that he's using it to enrich himself financially, but to further his political agenda. This is an attempt to consolidate power, to build his power. Trying to get the Senate. If he was successful in getting the Democrats to win the majority in the state Senate, that would have been a big coup for him.
Yeah.
That would have installed him as a major player in the state. Right. Maybe even on par with Cuomo. Maybe would have given him a little leverage against the governor. So I don't get the sense that he's actually benefiting financially from this, but I think it's a political issue.
Well, speaking of the politics of the matter, de Blasio marched into office like he had this huge plurality. I want to talk a little bit about the political capital that he may be expending. The folks at Quinnipiac said his job disapproval rates are at 52%, which is the lowest number that he's ever experienced. Do you think the public is turning on him?
I think the tide is beginning to turn on him. 41% approval, I think, is what he just received. Still
in like January, was it a 41? I know it was a few months ago, Bloomberg. Jeff Mays has magically appeared in the studio. Just to let you know, the DNA's political reporter is snuck in right now. We're talking about de Blasio's poll numbers and the fact that Quinnipiac had him at 52% unfavorable, and that was compared to, in January, he was compared with 37% of the folks said not such a great job. Right. So do you think he's going to spend the last of his political capital on this scandal stuff?
Well, the scandal's definitely affecting his numbers, as you can tell by the polls.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most serious things is that he's even losing support among some of his core supporters, which are black and Latino
people.
voters.
Yeah.
Their approval rating of the mayor dropped 19 points for black voters and 11 points for Latino voters. But I think the interesting thing is that he's still doing pretty well among Democrats, which for a Democrat like him is important in the city, because if you're going to run in a Democratic primary, you're going to need those voters. But it's no doubt that the scandal is taking a toll on his numbers.
All right, you've taken us there. You said Democratic primary. 2017 is going to be here before we blink. So they did some imaginary matchups. They paired de Blasio in a race with Scott Stringer or Ruben Diaz up in the Bronx, or our own borough president Eric Adams running as these theoretical independents, not against the Democratic mayor. But they won well, they didn't win in every case. It was a wash. It was like a comparable vote. It wouldn't, right? He wouldn't have walked away with the victory, with Diaz to a lesser degree than the other two. But what do you think that means for the mayor, who still has some time to reform his image?
Well, I think interestingly in October, the poll they did show that he had low approval numbers, but there was no one out there who could beat him.
Right.
And I think that what these poll numbers show, although I'm a little skeptical because they ran them as independents,
right,
it would probably look different in a Democratic primary. I think what these numbers show is that these scandals have maybe opened up opportunities for people. And I'm hearing from my sources that Scott Stringer is considering it.
Surprise.
Even someone like Tish James, I've heard rumblings that she's out talking to her supporters to see if it would be possible for her to make a run.
Right.
So what the mayor has what these scandals have done is have made him pretty, he was looking pretty good despite some concerns from the public about his performance, but now he's emboldened some of his challengers. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out going forward.
Well, Melissa Mark Viverito's elevated herself to the national level on a few instances. I wonder why her name doesn't pop up in the list. And I know she said, not me, I don't want to do it, but they all have to say, not me, I don't want to do it. Why isn't anyone asking voters about her?
I mean, she's to the left of the mayor, and she's been one of the mayor's strongest allies. Which is not a bad thing in this
city, right?
Well, no, it hasn't been up until now.
Bernie Sanders folks running around, she could do well.
Right, it hasn't been up until now, but I think what I'm hearing from her people is that she's not going to run against this mayor. Who knows, that could change, it's politics.
Well, they've been homies, but the more he goes down, the more she want to distance herself, which brings me to the hashtag, hashtag protect progress, that a lot of the mayor's homies in the city council are trying to get behind, and we're standing with our mayor. We want to protect these strides that we made, and even if it's a sinking ship in the office, we want to, sort of keep this good thing going. What do you think about that hashtag?
Well, I think that only depends on how much more information comes out about this scandal. As if more comes out, which I imagine it would, and the worse it looks, I think you'll see people starting to distance themselves from the mayor more and more. I think it's okay for now because it maybe doesn't look that bad, but I think if they're looking at their own political future, you're not going to see that.
So you're the guys who run the thing over there at DNA. Do you think this is going to get worse? Is this just the tip of the iceberg, or is there time for us to lose our collective consciousness before 2017 comes around?
I mean, anytime you have the U.S. attorney looking into anything that you're doing, it's a cause for concern. They just don't launch these cases for their health. They obviously see something there. So, I think what the poll shows is that right now it's damaged him, but it doesn't seem like it's critical damage at this point. But as Janon said, as the investigation proceeds, who's sure what's going to come out, what type of issues are going to come out. So that's a big issue going forward as he heads into re-election.
I'm wondering why de Blasio and why now, when it seems like the last time we had the city council and there was a huge turnover when there were all these seats up and the real estate lobby pumped more money than God into the race for city council, and no one's probing them or doing finance questions about the whole system. Is this really about an indictment of the system or de Blasio particularly, which I don't think anyone thinks of as a particularly corrupt figure?
Well, I think you have a U.S. attorney that has expressed publicly some dismay at the state of our politics in both the city and the state. And I think he's making a statement with these investigations that he's going after the status quo, things that were considered normal before, such as ways of raising money. He's saying this is no longer going to go on. So it's a huge statement on his part to shake up the political establishment, both in New York City and in Albany.
So what's Borough running for, Janon?
He says nothing. He says he's happy where he is. So we'll see, I guess,
Until he pops up vice president somewhere. I don't know, write it down. But so we're coming to the end of the thing. I wondered if you could make any sort of predictions. I sort of hinted at it a second before, but is this Mayor de Blasio's best thing to just ride it out, or what's his move right now?
I think he's gonna have to ride it out. I mean, I think we'll see what comes out in the future. And we'll see how effective he can still govern with this cloud over him. If it gets worse, then we'll have to reassess that.
Okay, last word to the late guy.
I mean, I think the mayor, my bad. I think the mayor is, if you hear him speak, he's speaking directly to the voters at this point.
Yeah.
He's talking about, hey, they're coming after me because I want to get you universal pre-K. I want to get you affordable housing. I wanted to overturn the Senate in the benefit of the city. So he's already moved beyond, some of these issues, and he knows he's has some issues. He's talking to the voters right now. Whether they listen is a different thing, but I think the poll numbers show that he is not as critically damaged as you would think, given this wave of bad news coverage that he's gotten.
Well, we want to thank you guys for being here. Thanks to DNAInfo. Hope to partner with you and see you a lot more on the show. And we'll definitely be looking for that list of donors who didn't get the bang for their buck that de Blasio promised to let us know about. Oh, yeah, they do.